Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Center for Imagination. I'm Jamie Williams, the director of CFI, and we're so glad that you came today. We have some very special guests. We'll be talking about our origin stories at Woodstock and how the archives play into that. We've got Sonam Thomas, our librarian, Bob Shoemaker, our Woodstock archive specialist, and we've got a very special guest, Cate Whitcomb, our alumni from the class of 1966. I will let them introduce themselves a little bit more, but they'll be talking about some surprising finds that they've made in the Woodstock archives. As we all know, Woodstock is part of all of our history. Being here at Woodstock makes it part of our history. So the history you'll hear today is part of your history as well. And hopefully you can share some of these stories going forward. So without further ado, welcome to our live stream audience. Thanks for joining us. And I will hand over to our guests. Thank you.
Let's let Cate start first.
Yes.
You mean just introduce myself? Okay, we hadn't decided on the order of our presentation, but apparently I'm going to go first. Yes, I am Cate Whitcomb, as Jamie told you. I served as the development director here at Woodstock from '97 to 2000, and during that time set up the beginnings of what our physical archives are today. The location had been identified by the administration. How many of you know where it is? It's down in the quad. It's down in the quad. How can I describe it? Beside the quad library. If you know where the quad library is, the door is right there to the south of the quad library, the alumni office. It's located in the back side of the alumni office. So my mom and dad's class of 1942 established the archives. My mother was a trained archivist after she left her service here in India, and so she was very enthusiastic and made her class very enthusiastic. And as a result, I've made my class very enthusiastic. So we have financially supported getting supplies and equipment. So, and I have returned numerous times to continue organizing the archives. And we've made some wonderful discoveries along the way because things were just in a giant pile in the middle of the room when I first got there. So things have come to light. In fact, we've discovered things today as Bob and Sonam and I have continued to look at things that are stored there. And it's really, it is the history, and it's a lot of old documents, but it's a very live place because it tells a story. And what I'm going to tell you is a story that I discovered. And, well, actually, and partly it discovered me. So the title of my presentation is Wings on a Journey to the Archives, the story of two Bobs, okay? It begins with this, it's the story of Robert Hansen, so Bob Hansen. Do you all know where this picture is? The plaque is there on the veranda beside Parker Hall. He was a graduate of the class of 1937 and was in Germany on a bicycle trip, actually, when Hitler clearly breached the Versailles Treaty. And he was very affected by that and very upset. But he continued on to the US and went to Hamlin College in Minnesota. But then after Pearl Harbor, it became pretty clear to him that he needed to be part of this effort to keep America safe. So he enlisted in the Marines and earned his wings as a second lieutenant in the Marines on February 19th, 1943. And from then on, he served for 2 years in the Marines. And some of you have read this in other places. It's not there at the plaque, but he had 25, what they call kills. I don't advocate war, so this is not something that I promote, but this is simply a fact of our history, and you have to look at the complexity of things. And he was doing what he felt he needed to do to keep things safe. But he brought down 25 enemy planes, And on February 3rd, 1944, I'm just going to read you the drama of what happened. He participated in a fighter sweep. On a return flight over Papua New Guinea, he left his flight path to strafe a lighthouse at Cape St. George that had proved troublesome as an enemy flak tower and observation post. His friends watched from above as Hansen's blue-gray Corsair ran at the tower at 6 machine guns peppering the structure. Suddenly, they were horrified to see his aircraft shudder as its wings disintegrated from flak hits. The young ace tried to ditch, but his wing dug into the water, and his plane cartwheeled and crashed, leaving only scattered debris. Hansen would have turned 24 the next day, so he was 23 the day he died. And he was to have returned the next week to the US. So he died right at the end of his service. As a result of that, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. And these are all documents that are actually in the archives, but they got there. I'll tell you how they got there after I finish the presentation. So actually, I just want to pass this around. If somebody wants to come in there, Bob, help me. Just pass it around and take a look at it. You can read the wording. And at the point that he was given, it was a posthumous award, the Medal of Honor, by the President of the US. And of course, his parents were involved, and they were given the Medal of Honor. And they also gave his mother his flight wings. And Bob clarified this for me yesterday, because I don't know very much about the military, but he wouldn't have been wearing his wings when he was killed. His wings would have been on a dress uniform somewhere back where he was stationed. And so the wings become, it's like giving the flag at a funeral. The wings are given to the family as a memento. At that point, the Hansens were serving in Lucknow, and at the same time, there was a family called Forsgren, and there was a Bob Forsgren. So this is the story of the two Bobs. He was younger than Bob Hansen by about 12 years. He graduated from Woodstock in 1949, got married, returned to the US, went to college, got married, and came back and taught PE here at Woodstock for several years. I knew him as a student. He didn't teach me PE because he was the men's PE teacher. But during this time, his parents had Bob Hansen's wings. In the meanwhile, Woodstock had built Hansen Field and named it for Bob Hansen. So and we've all been aware during all the time I was a student that he was a hero in World War II. So the story of these wings then continue, because Mrs. Hansen then gave them to Mrs. Forsgren, because she knew that Bob Forsgren had been a big fan of what a hero this man had been in the war. And so Bob Forsgren was then the possessor of these wings. Well, the next parts of the story, I am part of the rest of the story, because then in 2002, Bob Forsgren found out that Bob Hansen had had a sister named Edith Hansen. And she was actually not born until 1938, so she was born the year after her older brother left India. So he probably, I don't know if he ever met her, I'm not sure that they ever, so they had 4 older boys, and then they had an afterthought, the daughter Edith. And Edith then sort of vanished from view, and Bob didn't know where she was. In 2002, he writes to Mrs. Hansen, because the Mr. Hansen Sr. had passed away, and said, the Hansens gave my parents the wings of Bob Hansen when he lost his life in the Pacific, and I still have this memento. If you have contact with Edith Hansen, Bob Hansen's sister, please see about the possibility of me sending her those wings. Okay, so this is back in 2002. Well, move forward. Nothing happens from that. Then in 2007, he writes to Edith and he thinks he has an address for her in California. So I have a 2-page letter that he wrote to her, remembering all their times together in Lucknow and how he has these wings and he would like to give them to Edith. Well, moving on. Then Bob Forsgren passes away on May 4th, 2016. So this is 9 years later. In the meanwhile, Eva has written a book, which now lives in the Joy Rue Library, and it's located in the archives. The book is titled Viking Journeys, Thoughts and Memories, and it has lots of pictures from their life here in India, their life in various places around the world. One of the Forsgren sons actually is a teacher at the American School in Mumbai right now. I think he's still teaching there. So at some point then, after Bob Forsgren dies, sometime after 2016, Eva makes contact through the Woodstock community, and someone tells her, oh, Cate Whitcomb does the archives at the school. Maybe they would be interested in receiving the wings. And I went, and I can't remember how she contacted me. I know it wasn't email because she was quite elderly by then and was not doing anything digital or internet related. But she said, I must have talked to her on the phone, and she said, can I send you the wings? And I have these letters that Bob wrote, and we don't know, we don't know where the sister is, but maybe you can help me. So I have to put the mic down. So this envelope showed up at my house, and inside the envelope, there's a little box with paper wrapped all around it. Bob Forsgren, Bob Hansen's Marine Wings. And I opened it. This is when the archivist starts to cry. I opened it. It's a little, I don't know, it's a chocolate laxative box, actually. And I opened the box, and there are the gold wings that are Bob Hansen's wings. And I said, well, that's easy. I'll just take them back to the archives and put them all in a file. So that's where Bob Hansen's wings live now, is in a box, a very special box in the archives. Metal is probably not too bad to store gold in, because they are gold. And they are safely tucked away. So that's the story of the two Bobs and the wings and how they reached Woodstock. There's a little addendum where I want to encourage any students that are here, and I'm sorry, I love that you're all here, but I see that none of you are students. Because then when we got to Woodstock, when I brought the wings and Margot and I were working on things, I said, well, this is easy. I'm just going to Google Edith Hansen and see what comes up. Well, come to find out, and this is the irony of the whole story, she married a Japanese puppeteer and moved to Japan, learned Japanese, became a very famous movie star in Japan, is widely known throughout the country, has written many books in Japanese. I mean, think of the irony of her brother and the World War, and then the rest of her life. She also then became very involved with Amnesty International and became the president or chairman of Amnesty International for all of Japan. Her first husband passed away, and she now lives with her house husband, as he's called, in a small town in Japan. And what I want someone to do is travel to Japan. She resides in a small mountain village in Wakayama Prefecture, where she lives with her Japanese house husband. And an Osaka-based journalist did this entire interview with her. And as far as we know, she's still living. She would be 83 or 84 this year. So she is Bob Hansen's sister, and that's really the rest of the story. And we don't have the rest of the story, so we need someone to go to Japan. So that's all I have to tell you about the wings.
That you wanted to say.
Oh, and yes, one more thing I wanted to say. Thank you. I had it written down, and then I didn't do it. Bob and I found this yesterday in the archives, and it's a folder that says the Robert M. Hansen Award, and we thought, well, this is interesting. And then it says, presented annually by the American Fighter Pilots Association to the Marine Corps Outstanding Fighter Squadron. And we were both very puzzled. We're going, what? And I mean, I knew this was a picture of Bob, but then there were other pictures. I'm going, who are these people? Well, it turns out to be a squadron that won this award. And I don't know who sent us this. We don't know the provenance for how it reached the, it's best to know the provenance, you know, where things came from. But at any rate, these showed up. And then Bob did the internet search, and we discovered they are still awarding the Robert M. Hansen Award. This one was awarded in 2019, is the one that we found online. You can just Google it on your own phone and do Robert M. Hansen Award, and you will see that it's something that's still going on. So
78 years after he died.
78 years after his death. So the story lives on, and we are, you know, it's part of our story. It's a story we can repeat and tell people. It's part of Woodstock's story. But like I said, we don't know the last half about Edith, so we still have an untold part. So that's all I have to say. You're welcome. Thank you.
And you want me to go next? Okay. Since the title of this presentation is Amazing Finds in the Archives, I'm going to show you something amazing. Now, I think everybody here knows who the Dalai Lama is. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989, I think, and he is considered the head of the Tibetan government in exile. When he was exiled in 1959, one of the first places he came was Missouri, and he lived over near Happy Valley is where he stayed. He came to Woodstock in November of 1959. And in the archives, you can hold this. In the archives, I found this in his original handwriting. Now, I want everybody to see this. That's in his handwriting. And I can tell you what it says because there's a translation. Somebody did a translation on the Tibetan government in exile paper. It says, "May all the members and the staff and students of this institution have good health, grace, glory, and fulfillment in their great task of teaching and learning. May they succeed in serving humanity. They will always be in my prayers." His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I think that carries over to today, that we're in his prayers. And he did visit again in 1997.
And he
But
said on the Parker Hall stage, he said, the Woodstock are my first friends in India.
isn't that amazing? I met him in 2000, and it was really moving. I met him in Portland, Oregon. And yeah, it's just, you know, he's fresh out of exile and he comes to Woodstock and offers his prayers to us. I think that carries over to us.
Well, it was Ken and Burgoyne who invited him. The principal invited him to come and visit us.
Okay, the second thing I have to show you is, this is typically how archives are stored to make sure they stay in their folders. I'm going to open this up and show it to you. Okay, everybody here knows what August 15th, 1947 was. What significance that date is. I was hoping some children would be here because they may not know what this is. This is a newspaper. dated August 15th, 1947. It's in our archives. This is incredible. Can you read the title? Two Dominions are born. So there's articles about the independence. And the second one is the same date. It's a supplement to the Statesman. Pretty amazing. And these are in the archives, and they're very delicate. I want to get them digitized when we can. The third amazing thing I found in the archives is a newspaper dated Saturday, January 31st, 1948. Mahatma shot dead. Somebody thought enough to put this in a folder, and we still have it. There are probably not too many copies of this floating around. So when I saw this, I thought, wow, this is amazing. I didn't open it up to read the article because this is pretty fragile still. But hopefully, as we continue our work in the archives, we can digitize these records and have them available to all of the Woodstock community and scholars from outside interested in studying the history of Woodstock. And I'm going to pass the presentation on to Sonam now, who also has something amazing to share with you.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm very happy to be a part of this evening today, and same time learning a lot about Woodstock School. And I'm helping Mr. Bob in archive, and we are rearranging historical records, and it feels exciting to know people, students, and staff. It's amazing work, I can say that. And yes, so as you know, I'm a librarian here, and before I started with Mr. Bob, Mr. Augustine, our HOD, librarian HOD, we were discussing about Vera Marley library, and we were thinking how we can like decorate a wall with Vera Marley pictures and all. So that time we don't know, we have lots of information in archive and with pictures and all. So yes, when we started our work, and I found something very interesting in archive related Vera Marley also and library also. So I want to share with you those points. And first, it was constructed in year 1929, and before that, school library was located in the music building, and one library was in Midlands for teachers training college. In 1924-25, Dewey Decimal System of Cataloging was introduced by Miss Colley, and in 1927, Miss Mary Nevin, the school librarian, made the first cataloging card, and she also started reading period for grade 6 to grade 7. Yes. In 1928, high school building construction started and was completed in March 1929 when the library from Quad Music was moved to its current location. Total collection of books was 2,600 that time. And during 1937 to 1948, many upgrades were done. So I want to ask you a question. Do you know the name of high school library? Please tell if you can't. Yes, please. Yes, so now I will tell you. Yes. So it's in 1948, Miss Vera Ivy Marley joined as a librarian who was already working as a teacher. She joined Woodstock in 1918 as elementary school teacher. Before a librarian, she was a teacher, supervisor, editor, and she served Woodstock for 50 years. After she joined the library, she made a good contribution with addition of resources and books. She introduced Hindi books too. The total collection during her time was 9,023 books. And at present, we have almost 50,000 books in both libraries. Later in 1960, the reading area, current writing center, and current English department was added. After Miss Vera Ivy Marley, many librarians have served with great commitment, and now I'm also part of it, and I'm very happy. And I want to share one more interesting thing. When I was reading the history of high school library, it gave me an idea to write about librarians and library progress. And I want to thank Miss Jamie, because when she was writing emails to us, I saw something there, remembering yesterday to understand today. And maybe so in future, people can read it and connect it with this quotation, remembering yesterday to understand today. But still, I need to read more history about library, which we have in archive. And I'm sure whenever we have such event in future, I will have more interesting information to share with you. And this history is written by Miss Vera Marley. And I want to show you something also. Yeah, here we have this card, Vera Marley card, and this appreciation letter. So you can read it and you can connect it, how active she was, and like, yes. And Miss Cate was there that time. So if you want to ask any question about her and library, you can catch up with her also. Yes. So thank you so much. Thank you.
The letter that Sonam is passing around is a letter from Reverend Alan Parker, who was the principal in 1939, and we have the original letter. It's typewritten, but his original signature, and he's using his personal stationery to write this letter. When we found that, I was blown away.
She was a very, very favorite teacher of many people. She taught my mother Latin. I don't think my dad wasn't as good enough a student to take any of her classes, but people loved her. She was a dynamic person on campus, and I knew her well as a child. I grew up knowing her well. Her room was right there where the archives are now. Actually, where Katie Jo's office is, that whole suite of rooms there was Miss Marley's. That was where she lived.
She actually lived there?
Oh, yeah, she lived there. That was her home. Yeah, yeah.
Do you happen to remember the story that Ashok Chatterjee told us when he was here about Lynn Farm?
I think Ashok.
The photo of basically there were these things where people were seeing photos of, the kind of ethereal, ghostly-like photos of the Lord Jesus showing in different things. There was one that came with this couple that was at Barlow Gulch. And he asked Vera Marley if she had seen this photo, and she said to him, "Child, if the good Lord to come to Missouri, what would he be doing in Barlow Gulch?"
That sounds just like Miss Marley.
I've got a feeling that she might have lived in the advancement office.
That's what she
That's
was
what she just said. Sorry, I don't know that.
No, that was
Were you listening, Will?
That's why I got that feeling.
There you go, because you just heard it. So any questions from any of you about the archives or anything that we've said?
I hope all of you will stop by and see the archives and let me give you a tour and explain what we're doing there. And hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to put out some information that describes what we hope will happen in the future. Please.
Yeah. Is there any document from Woodstock Foundation taking this work?
Oh, yeah. Yes. In fact, we have 2 whole files, and this is one of Bob and Sonam's next jobs, but they're 2 4-drawer files of building records, and in those there are the original documents of the property and the land and all of that. Yeah, it all exists, and it's safe in the archives.
There's an incredible number of property documents. There's 8 drawers full of them, and they haven't been cataloged. They haven't been indexed, they haven't been inventoried. That's our next project, and it's going to take a lot of work to identify each property document and describe it and have a digital record so that we can search to find the proper and put the proper location where this document is at the present time. So it's pretty exciting.
Last weekend, just to give an example, last weekend I was having lunch in a restaurant opposite Landing Hospital, and a pastor came to us and we started talking, and when we told him we are working at Woodstock, he said, you know, that Woodstock was founded by 5 families. So he started telling us his version of the origin of Woodstock. But he has been living here for generations. So he told, for example, he told me that his grandfather was working for the British, and that is how his family came to live here. And probably his grandfather was there when the school started. And so it's very
Sorry. Anyway, Mom started writing to her class in the fall of 1943. This is, of course, when Bob Hansen was doing his service in the Pacific. And then my dad wrote back to her, first person that answered her from the class. And he was immediately shipped here to India to work at a Army Air Force base outside of Calcutta, Kharagpur. And they then wrote to each other for the next 2 years, sometimes every day, 3 or 4, there would be 4 letters in a row that would come from my mom, and then there'd be 3 from my dad. And to read them, you can't learn a lot about the war because they couldn't write about anything. He couldn't even tell her where he was. He said something about, I'm in the land of mangoes and palm trees. But then he said he went in and he went to the Methodist what's the place in Calcutta? There's the Methodist, there's a center there, but he said I went in for services and to have rice and curry on Sunday night. So of course Mother knew where he was. But the censors didn't have any idea what he was talking about, so nobody crossed anything out. But they planned their whole lives and fell in love, and about halfway through those 2 years, Dad said, "Would you please marry me?" And Mom said, "Well, you know, we probably need to see each other first." Because they had never had any physical contact of any kind, and it wasn't possible for that 2.5 years until he was sent back to the States. And the letters go right until the day before they get married on March 22nd, 1947. So it's a really interesting perspective. And of course, my dad comes up here to Woodstock when he gets time off in the Army. He comes up here and roams around and talks to the younger kids and remembers the old days. It was his own personal worldwide Woodstock day. So for any of the students that are studying, you know, World War II and want to know about Woodstock's connection with it, there's the Bob Henson story, and there's my mom and dad's love story.
Any other questions?
I would like to add something, that there's another connection with the Dalai Lama in Woodstock. That is that when my husband, Santiago, was working for Woodstock, he worked for almost 1 year. It was during COVID times. During that time, when he was teaching at home in Goa, but he was working for Woodstock, he composed a work for the Dalai Lama, because the Dalai Lama came to Goa because he was given a chair, a Tibetan pedagogy and philosophy chair. I don't remember exactly the name, but he was given a chair at the Goa University. So Santiago proposed writing a work, he was a composer, writing a work about the life of the Dalai Lama, and he decided to focus the whole cantata, which he named Big Ocean, because he found out that Dalai Lama in Tibetan language means big ocean of knowledge. So he composed a whole cantata on his life, and one of the parts of the cantata is a runaway from Tibet and the entrance in India. And then when the Dalai Lama came, we did a very big event at the Kala Academy, that is the biggest theater in Panjim, and I was singing the cantata because it was composed with Tibetan instruments and with the Om Mani Padme Hum, that is this mantra, very old Tibetan mantra. He composed the whole piece on that mantra, and we sang it to the Dalai Lama that was there, and Santiago gifted the piece on behalf of the Goa University to the Dalai Lama himself. And I have at home this cantata with some writings of the Dalai Lama, giving thanks to Santiago for composing this work. And that happened just a few months before Santiago passed away. So there is another connection with Woodstock and the Dalai Lama during the COVID times, many years later.
And we also do have family member of Daniel Russell, class of 2001. His father has done a lot of work on the Dalai Lama's books in the English language as well. So yeah, we do have a lot of touch points.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, I just want to thank Cate for coming to Woodstock and sharing her knowledge about the archives and having discussions. We've been talking nonstop for 2 days about the past, present, and future of the Woodstock archives. So I just want to give her a special thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cate.
I can't stay away.
And I wonder if it would be possible to maybe put Bob Hansen's wings up here and let people come by and see them.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I would
You
love to
should
see
look
them
at them.
myself.
They're so pretty.
Yeah.
They're so pretty.
Yeah, that's something really special. And
They're so tiny. It's very, it's very hard to display them because they're. But it was very easy to bring them. I just stuck them in